Progress.
All right, welcome everybody to the Wednesday, May 22nd meeting of the Landmarks Commission. The first order of business on tonight's agenda is the roll call. Let's see. Chairman Ron Dane is absent. Alderman Jim Hutchinson.
Here, present.
Steve Rubis.
Here.
Susan.
Here.
David. And Rebecca. So we have a quorum. The second item, C, is the approval of tonight's agenda. Does anybody have any changes or modifications to the agenda?
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item D is approval of the minutes of April 17th, 2024 Landmarks Commission. Does anybody have any comments or corrections to those minutes? Hearing none, can I get a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item E, regular business. Item number 1 is certificate of appropriateness 24-17. This is consideration with possible action on a design review for a mural located at 130 Walnut Street. Stephanie or Jason, you want to take us through this one?
I'd love to. This is Jason. Hello, everyone. The building in question is the beautiful Bellin Building at the corner of Walnut and South Washington Street. The mural location, based on this map, would be the northern corner, so the facing towards the river, northern corner. Yep, right there. And I suppose the important things to point out here are that the wall has previously been painted, it is currently painted, and the Landmarks Commission has taken a favorable view of painting on previously painted brick for the purposes of murals in the Broadway districts, for example. And this really is no different. We have a proposed painted mural to go on painted brick. The recommendation is to approve, provided that the paint used is highly vapor permeable and appropriate for masonry applications. Thank you.
I also have some information to share. I did receive one call in support of the mural, and I also received one letter that I'm going to read into the record. To the Landmarks Commission, this location would be a distraction to drivers coming over the bridge and approaching a signaled light. It can cause congestion for pedestrians interfering with residential traffic coming in and out of that exit. It is also a dishonor to a great person to put it up in an alley. Signed, Jerry Kluckow, 118 South Washington Street, A422, Green Bay, Wisconsin, 54301.
Okay, discussion on this item?
That's pretty unique to have a written objection to that from the neighbor. I'd like to find out if that person actually is in attendance and invite them to speak. So at this point, I'd like to open up the floor because that's pretty unique, I think, unprecedented for our work here. So motion to open the floor.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the floor is open. Do we have anybody that wants to speak on this item?
We do have the applicant here if there are any questions.
Right, I'm happy to answer any questions.
I guess I don't have a question, but since the applicant is here, you know, I think it's our responsibility of this commission to look at the effect on the historic buildings. The letter that was read and entered into the record expressed some concerns about traffic control and safety, and quite honestly, I feel like that's some other department or jurisdiction within the city of Green Bay that would govern that.
Totally, people.
I'm inclined to, I guess, really not consider that because I don't think that's the responsibility of this commission.
I agree.
I agree.
I'm going to make a motion to close the floor since we don't have anyone in attendance who wishes to speak.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the floor is closed.
I'll make a motion to approve this recommendation exactly as written by staff.
I'll second that motion. Any other discussion on this? Okay, we have a motion to approve. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Item E2 is certificate of appropriateness 24-18, consideration of possible action on a design review for solar panels located at 914 South Quincy Street. Jason?
Yes, 914 South Quincy Street is a contributing house in the Astor District. Here you see it on a map, circled and highlighted. I want to point out on the map that the front of the house, I'm going to call the east side, and that's important because the proposal that I reviewed called for placing solar panels on the eastern facing slope of the roof and the southern facing slope of the roof. To that end, I referred us in the packet to the National Park Service guidance on such things. And that guidance boils down to if the solar panels aren't really visible from a public right-of-way, then that's fine. Unfortunately, I think we're in a situation where the east-facing panels here would be visible from not only the street, but the opposite sidewalk, and if you're relatively tall, even the sidewalk adjacent to the property. I see here in this particular slide, the picture on the left is what I received and reviewed. I can't really speak to the other two pictures here. Those are perhaps late additions. I don't know enough if that's what's going on there or not.
Those were
But-
the additional
Yes.
options. So this is, on the left is the preferred option. They could discuss with their solar company to do the options on the right.
Well, at a glance, the option at the top right still has panels on the east-facing slope. The option on the bottom right, yeah, it looks pretty intriguing. I'd be wanting to hear more about that. As reviewed, though, the preferred option that we see on the left, the recommendation from staff, that's me, is denial of installation on the street-facing, the eastern-facing portion of the roof. The rest looked pretty fine by me. Oh, yeah, by the way, they wanted to put in new storm windows. Recommend approval of that. Thank you.
Do we have the applicants in attendance tonight?
I don't see them, unless that's Kimberly, but I don't believe so. I had been emailing with the applicant, and she was in Europe earlier this week, so I wasn't sure she'd be able to attend, but did read the recommendation and said that she's willing to work with her solar company on different placements.
I'll say that I think it's admirable that the property owner is looking to look at the renewable energy sources available to them. And I agree with the comments from the staff that the originally proposed location on the east side of the residence is really not desirable because of the visibility of the panels. And the image that was in the packet on the bottom right that has the panels on the south face of the main residence building, and then what appears to be, I'm guessing, a garage on the west side of the property, feel that that's a more appropriate installation of the panels. And I'd be willing to make a motion to approve that.
I would second that motion. Hi, guys.
Hey, Ron. I don't disagree. Is this tricky with the storm windows and the three options and one? Do we need to kick it back for revised submittal that we would default to staff review? Or can we just approve as described?
How about we break this apart, two different aspects to it? So I'll make a motion to approve the storm window replacement.
Okay, well, let's back up a second. We've already got one motion that's seconded in my approval of the original application. So we can vote on that. And depending on the outcome of that, then we either have a second motion or we don't. Would that be correct?
I would agree, I would think there should be a second motion to approve the storm windows. I think we should keep that separate, just like David said.
Okay, so can I withdraw my motion?
Okay.
I'll make a motion to approve the storm windows as presented.
And I'll second that motion.
Okay, any other discussion on the storm windows? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so we have a motion approved to, for the installation of the storm windows, and now we have the issue of the solar panel installation.
Now, I'm going to object to any solar panels that are visible from the street, whether it's the opposite side or the same side, so that south and the east, that's just changing the historic nature of the home too much with any of the three options that were presented. The garage portion, I'd be okay with that part, but I would object to anything visible from any of the sidewalk view.
I agree.
Can I ask a technical question? Jason, is this asphalt shingle roof? Do you know?
That is a great question. I don't have the photograph in front of me, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I think it is.
Mhm.
Are we looking from the southwest view?
Yes.
I can't see the south side.
This would be from the sidewalk, from the southwest, or
Okay.
southeast, sorry.
I can't-
The front is facing east, on that left side with the little bump out is the south side of the building.
Right, and I can't see the roof on the south side slope.
Looking at the aerial though, I do see how that south side would be visible from further south on the sidewalk.
Yeah, I think if you're further south or across the street, you probably would notice that.
Okay?
For discussion's sake, I like the idea of renewable resources. I like the idea of something that's not going to permanently take away from the historic nature of the structure, right? Asphalt shingles and wood roofs can be repaired and replaced in kind. And if the precedent was exclusively this parallel to the curb and not visible from the sidewalk, I'm inclined to be A-okay with the south elevation, respectfully.
I'm not.
If
I guess if they just had it on the, what appears to be garage roof,
You walk.
in my estimation would be fine.
Can you walk to the east?
Jason's doing that.
Oh,
Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to illustrate that because of the trees here, there may not actually be much view currently available of the south slope of the roof.
Actually, I'm manipulating the Google map image from the street going further south, and there's a very good view of that south hip end. The solar panels on the south hip would be very visible from the street and the sidewalk, particularly when leaves are gone.
Mhm.
Jason, can you repeat the precedent statement, please? You're muted.
I'll fix that. National Park Service, in a nutshell, states that the solar panels should not be visible from a public right-of-way. So they show examples of appropriate installations on flat roofs or roofs on the rear of properties. They don't have a formula per se, so it's a subjective matter.
It's fair. Visible from right away.
Yes.
All right, well, I'll make a motion to allow approval of installation of the panels as long as they are not on the south or the east roof of the main two-story building.
I'll second that.
I was just thinking if we said south, east, and north.
I don't think we need to.
I don't know why somebody do it on the north side, you don't get that much sun there.
Yeah, I don't think we need to say that, the solar guys will deliver that message. So we got a motion and a second, is there any other discussion? All in favor?
I,
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Jason and Stephanie, if that applicant wants to come back and reapply, are they allowed to do that?
Yes.
Next item is item E3, Certificate of Appropriateness 24-19, consideration of possible action on a design review for roof, window, and siding work at 735 South Jackson Street.
Ooh, good, microphone's working. Hey, this property, also in Astor Historic District, it's a Dutch colonial revival, and it is a contributing property. Here you see a photo, fairly recent. I need to point out several things in the photo that we're looking at. First of all, in the second story, that shed roof dormer, if you will, it's got vinyl siding on it currently. We also see some K-style gutters along the edges of the roof, and then the first story has a stucco finish. So also above the door, the front door there, you see a little arched entry roof area and then two big corbels holding that up. If you could just kind of burn that image all into your mind as we proceed. I think there are 6 discrete items to discuss with a mixed bag of recommendations depending on which one we're addressing. Some additional photos here. Top left shows the rear of the house. It's generally not visible from a public right-of-way. What we'll be discussing here is you'll see there's a pair of short, the little horizontal ribbon of 6-pane windows right there. Those are proposed to be replaced with slightly larger windows. Okay. And then bottom right picture, above that 1-story sunroom, I'm going to call it, you see there are actually a pair of doors into the 2nd story. That's fun. The proposal includes replacing the doors there with windows. And again here, I think it's generally not visible from the public right-of-way. I think this photo in the bottom right was taken from, say, the neighbor's driveway, so something to consider. The proposal calls for, Stephanie, I don't have my cheat sheet in front of me, but I know there's new roof, check.
There you
New
go.
gutters, yep, check. The siding, which we'll want to talk on quite a bit, back on that previous photo. Then doors, the rear windows, and some corbels. So the roof, it's a good thing, that would be eligible for tax credits. We pointed that out to the applicant. The gutters, no problem. They're proposing replacing K-style gutters with like K-style gutters. I pointed out that half rounds would be superior for the period of significance, but replacing like with like is no problem. When it comes to the siding, that is a problem. As I pointed out in your packet, there are some Secretary of the Interior standards that are not so supportive of that proposal. Here in the diagram, you see a proposal to replace the 2nd story clapboard-looking vinyl siding with vinyl shingle-looking siding. That's maybe a no-no, but you can interpret those standards just as well as I can on that one. And then on the first story, the initial proposal was to either remove and replace or just cover the stucco with vinyl clapboard style siding. That's also probably a no-no. I don't know enough of the history of the stucco, but I know it was there back in 1979, and I would speculate it's been there for a long time. I don't know that it's original though, so that's kind of an open question. Here in this diagram, you see these little corbels being kind of sprinkled across the overhanging roof eaves. That also is a pretty firm no-no. That would be a conjectural feature under the Secretary of the Interior standards. And hey, not for nothing, I see in this diagram there's a new front door, but that was not included in the proposed changes, so I did not address that. Let's talk about these one by one again. On the roof, staff recommends approval, noting that that's a tax credit opportunity. On the gutters, staff recommends approval, noting that like for like is fine. On the siding, Secretary of the Interior Standard number 6 for rehabilitation suggests, maybe doesn't explicitly state, but suggests that replacing clapboard appearance with clapboard appearance would be fine, but replacing shingle style in lieu of the clapboard appearance is maybe crossing a line. And then on Secretary of the Interior Standards number 2 and 4, that stucco exterior of the first story may warrant retention and preservation. On item number 4, so there I recommend you discuss those. My inclination would be denial of the siding as proposed, but there's room for discussion there, and I want you to know that. Item number 4, the doors, I'm recommending approval, noting that that side elevation is largely not visible from the public right-of-way, and the doors may or may not have been historically present. If I was wagering something, I would wager that they were not historically there, so little impact to the integrity of design and materials here. Number 5, rear windows, not visible from a public right-of-way, recommending approval. After the fact, some cut sheets for the windows did come in. The only ding I can say against the proposed windows is that they're simulated divided light and have only the grid between the panes rather than a grid between the panes plus on the faces of the glass. But again, they're not visible from a public right of way, so apathy kicks in pretty quickly there. Number 6, the corbels, recommend denial under the notion that they're a conjectural feature per Secretary of the Interior Standards number 3. And then it wasn't entirely clear when I reviewed this if the big corbels that flank the door on the front of the house would be retained. I understand now that they would be retained, so that's less of a concern. Thank you.
Jason, did you say that the siding on the second floor of the building is vinyl siding?
My understanding is that yes, it is currently vinyl. Now, the National Register nomination claims that this house is identical to one nearby. The nearby house, very similar, it's a side gambreled Dutch colonial revival. That nearby house has the historic wood clapboard with mitered corners at both the first and second story. Here you see the corners are not mitered, it's got a corner board simulation of the vinyl.
We don't have any historic images of this, including that whatever's going on with that 2-story patio, doors out to a roof.
I don't. Ideally I could just pull up, the as-built photos of everything, but
Well, yeah, that feels a little fishy too. It's a when's your period of significance discussion pretty quick after that, I'm sure.
yeah, so if I can just jump in on period of significance for Astor is a little squishy because the National Register nomination, and when it was written in 1979 and approved in 1980, that was early on in National Register nominations, and ours for Astor does not include an explicit period of significance. Based on the properties that were determined to be contributing, I can say retroactively that the period of significance appears to be about 1860 up until about 1945-ish. this house was built in that period of significance, 1930-ish or the 1920s, but, it's hard to say when changes may have occurred, such as perhaps those second-story doors or the stucco exterior, if not original.
I mean, if that thing on the side was an addition.
Yeah, I don't know. Those one-story additions are fairly common on the Dutch colonials from this era. So common, in fact, that I would conjecturally say that they were probably an extra option on the mail order package, that, yes, check, I want that room. So.
Well, I'd like to recommend a course of action here. We've got 6 different items with, a little bit of a range of recommendations, from overt and easy recommendations to pretty strong denial. So if we could break this up, say, into much smaller pieces, I think this will be manageable in terms of approval, disapproval, and particular discussion. With that in mind, I'm going to make the motion that we approve items number 1, the roof, and items number 2, the gutters.
I'll second that motion. Any other discussion? All in favor of approval of items number 1 and 2?
Yes.
Aye.
Any objections? Okay, that motion carries. So now we still have left on our menu items 3, 4, 5, and 6.
I'm good in discussing number 3, the siding. I think, in my opinion, no question to deny removal of the stucco. That is a substantial change, and I think Jason's argument that it is probably historical is compelling. I'd really like to hear other opinions though on the second floor, since it's vinyl and not historic, but at the same time what is present is mimicking the historic clapboard. So would we push for like, or would we say it's more about the material, the historic integrity is gone, let it be? I'm intrigued to hear what other thoughts are.
I think it should be like for like. First, you don't touch the stucco on the first floor, no removing it, no covering it up with something. And on the second floor, if they want to replace the vinyl with the same style, I'm fine with that. I think to do that shingle style vinyl would be wrong.
And I agree with you, Susan. I think that makes sense. I think like is fine.
Item number 4. Any discussion on the removal of the doors and replacement with windows?
What, yeah, Jason, can you repeat that? Was it actually a part of the application, or is it just picking it off the rendering?
Which doors is that?
Number 4 is only for the upper side doors, not for the front door.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I'm sorry, that's number 5 for those rear doors?
No, number 4 are the side
Okay.
ones that
Okay.
are located
I
here.
don't have my other computer open, so, and that was recommended for approval, correct?
Yes.
Right, because they probably really were originally windows. We
Hey,
think,
what, could we actually just resolve each item one at a time from this point forward before we discuss? Given that, I'm gonna, any thoughts on that? I said before, I'll guess, before I proceed.
Go ahead, David.
I'm gonna make a motion that number 3, the siding, be denied.
Second.
Any other discussion on the siding? We have a motion to deny. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item number 4 is the doors, removing the doors on the second floor and replacing with new windows.
I would make a motion to approve that.
Okay, I'll second that. Any other discussion on the second floor doors?
I'm okay with this, given that there's the lack of the sidewalk view. I would concur that it probably is not historic, but that's speculation, which is something that I think we should be reluctant to do. But given that there's the lack of impact from the sidewalk, I'm good with approval.
Okay, all in favor of approving item number 4?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. And now we have item number 5, which is removal and replacement of the rear windows of the house. I will make a motion to approve that.
Second that.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. And the last thing is the addition of new corbels on the front of the house. Quite frankly, since we denied the siding thing, it makes no sense to talk about corbels at this point. I make a motion to deny those as well.
Second.
All in favor of denial of the corbels?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is certificate of appropriateness 24-20, consideration of possible action on a design review for replacement windows and doors at 231 North Broadway.
Hello.
Jason will
My
go first.
microphone is on. So let's go across the river to one of our commercial districts over in Fort Howard. Here you see the location. Sorry, my clock wants to talk. Okay, so a couple of things that I really need you to burn into your mind with this photo. First of all, you see it's got 2 metal doors in the front of the building. Those aren't so good from an architectural design perspective and were clearly added after the fact. So we'll be discussing those, but notice too that those doors cut through the sills for the windows, and the bottom of the doors are in kind of a decorative brickwork paneling. You know, there's a little texture to the brick there. Also, at the center front door in the first story, I need you to see there's some glass block above the transom there, yeah? So we've got historic glass block there. We got some weird doors in the second story, and there's some brick pattern stuff that's gonna come up. The proposal calls for some changes to this. In the top view, you see the is current condition with doors. In the bottom view, you see that those second story doors to nowhere are being replaced or proposed to be replaced with windows. And what I see there in the details is that the sills would be, corrected to make it look like those doors hadn't cut through the sills. And some infill brick to match existing below there, which I take to mean the new brick would have the same color and texture as the existing brick and would be arranged and put into the wall in such a manner as to finish the little texturing panels that are currently there, the brick relief work. That all sounds great. What troubles me slightly in this view is those glass blocks that we talked about above the first story door. I don't know if this is just a convenience of drafting, that they're not shown here, or if those are going to go away. But the proposal does call to replace the existing front door with new doors. And so I caution you to not forget about the glass block. That's a historic character-defining feature of the front facade. So Stephanie surprised me. What's in the next view here? Oh, the rear elevation. So top right, again, is the existing rear elevation, which is visible from a public right-of-way, but it's really far back from that public right-of-way, unless that's a public parking lot. I think maybe part of it is, but...
It won't be soon enough, so don't think of it that way.
Okay, so, it's visible. It's not going to catch your attention, I don't think. There's some pretty significant proposed changes back here. So in the top right view, you see a series of 6 windows across the top, and then in the middle, there's, some offset windows, but, a series of 6. The proposal calls for replacing the inboard centerline pair with sliding glass doors and balconies. And, you know, that's enough to raise an eyebrow, I suppose. In part because metal stuff that goes on the exterior, like the new doors on the front, SHPO takes a very dim view of anodized finish, or even a raw metal finish. It should be painted or powder coated or something of that sort. So here, you know, my eyebrow does go up when I see the picture in the top left of just a raw metal looking balcony. Not to mention the whole change in fenestration, but it is a rear elevation, so, you know, a little less concern. Moving on, what else we got?
They're mostly just interior layout ones.
Yep, interior plans beyond the scope of my review.
There you go. What's your recommendation?
Oh, my word, I actually wrote all this? Oh. Okay, so there's an open question. I don't know if this project is going to be utilizing tax credits. If they are, then I would recommend that the State Historic Preservation Office have an opportunity to comment and work with the applicant on making sure that SHPO is satisfied with the design as presented. But in the absence of that, I assume that tax credits are not currently being explored. So, moving on, that second paragraph there, proposed window replacements, likely appropriate based on our Landmarks Commission precedents. I note that the visual light transmittance for the second story and the third story, maybe not too big of a concern, but it is a concern for replacement storefront windows. And I don't recall seeing what the proposed visual light transmittance value is going to be for the replacement storefront windows. So that should be a value of 0.72, 74 or higher. Anything much darker than that, it starts to not look like a historic storefront and starts to look like a tinted window. Moving on, third paragraph there, I wanted to stress that I recommend you insist on maintaining that glass block transom. The proposed changes do call for replacing the entry door, the skylights, and the little transom above that. It was kind of silent on the glass block transom itself. Finally, I acknowledge that a replacement door and surround at the first story is likely appropriate, but there weren't any details provided on what the appearance of that replacement is going to be. So that's why I stressed to you the importance of having a painted finish or a powder coat baked on finish and not a raw metal or an anodized finish. So beyond that, I harped on my concern about the brick, that's great, and those glass blocks, that's great, but everything else, I think you're generally sympathetic towards, recognizing the rear elevation is kind of visible from a public right-of-way, but it's a rear elevation, so that I encourage you to discuss. Thank you.
Jason, is it fair enough to say that the application is lacking some of those details, such as finish and transmission?
That was my feeling. Now, I don't always catch the notes or something, but I didn't see any mention of finishes on the replacement doors here, or even the balconies in the back. It just said aluminum, I think.
Stephanie, do we know if applicant is available?
Yes, he is here with us, and I'd also like to note that that rear view is visible now from a public right-of-way, but there will be proposals to put buildings on those parking lot pads. So I would not think of that as a public view for much longer. Just something to add.
Make a motion to open the floor.
Second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the floor is open. Questions for the applicant?
I'd just like to mention the applicant, make sure that you're in concurrence with Jason's assessment on the front. Let's only talk about the front, that what's going on is a correction. As Jason pointed out, those doors to nowhere. What seems to be planned would be restoring the historic fabric, and that's something we rarely see, but it is very good to see, and I'm pleased. I'd just like to hear your response to that.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And just, I guess a little summary is that this is more of an introduction to the design. I'm not necessarily looking for approval today, because we don't have all those specs, especially in the brick, some of the things in the back. I'm more along the lines of looking just for approval because of the significant changes. Just that, like a preliminary, okay, like this design is good, and they get those specs. That being said, that is a design error in terms of the glass block above the center door on the front. That will be glass block. You can assume that that's going to be the case, and I'll make sure that's corrected in the next submission. In terms of the, as you're familiar with the 402 Dallasman building that we just went through with this, so all of the specs that we went through with that's a historical, or it's in a historical district as well. We're going to maintain the duplicate specs on those, which is right within what you're looking for, not only with the VLT, I think it's called VLT, the light transmission, as well as the non-anodized finish. There's, especially on the storefront, especially, we have like, I don't have it in front of me, but there's some sort of a paint on it, Canar or something like that, that goes right over the top of it, for not only the front, but also the back of this building. And then I'll stop for questions in a minute, but if you go to the back, in terms of the patio area, I'm sure everybody's familiar with the back patio area there at that building, but next to that, there's actually a whole vacant lot that's just being used, it's just empty, except for with the exclusion of 2 little dumpsters. So the idea is to make this more of an outdoor friendly area downtown, which is, we feel, really lacking, especially with the marketplace going in there. So we want to expand that. We'll actually replace all that brick, make it a really nice finish that'll match the brick building. And yeah, I guess that's really about it for that introduction.
Question then, you mentioned right off the bat that this is just an early proposal. What level of urgency do you have to proceed with this work?
As soon as everything's approved.
Part of the issue of delaying us here is the lack of some of the specs, like Jason had called for. But it sounds like you've got that either in line or in mind or another project, correct?
Yeah, we have 402 Dallasman further along, and we're actually meeting at, I'm actually meeting with Aaron next Wednesday, the 29th, regarding the facade grant for 402 Dallasman. We received our COA approval for that, I think it was last month or the month before. And we intend to use the same specs for this, but we did not get a quote for it. So I guess my question is that, I mean, it takes a significant amount of time, as you know, to get all those things approved. So one, I was wondering if, for the COA, if we could just say, hey, we're gonna use these same specs, here's what they are from 402. Or do we have to get a separate quote specifically for this? It's question number one. And then the number 2 is, there's some other finishes that are not included on 402, which such as the back balconies and the brickwork that we need to do to restore the front and, you know, the fence, if you want to call it, the barricade around the back. So we want to get those specs for you guys, and we don't have a timeline on that, but we are moving forward with this as vendors allow us to.
Well, I'd want to get you working as quick as you can. My inclination is when we close the floor would be to approve the front of the building as proposed, provided staff is given the specs that he referred to and it meets staff's approval. So this way you don't need to bring it to a whole new meeting. But I'm going to wait to do that till we close the floor.
David, what's your objection maybe with the rear of the building and why you wouldn't include that this time?
All right. Because it is visible from the existing right-of-way. So it can be seen. I am curious, I think Stephanie, you mentioned something about an impending construction. Could you elaborate on that? Because I think that definitely will have an effect on my thoughts.
Sure. So this is the building in question, and this entire parking area behind it is currently owned by the city and the RDA. It's obviously used as a parking lot. With the redevelopment of the public market, which is right next door, there are some options to do parking ramp, housing, some other types of development that would go in conjunction with the public market. Those haven't been brought online yet. They're not, they're not going to be done anytime soon. And by that I mean the next couple of months as the public market is moving forward. But the idea is that this parking area would just become a spot for developments in the near future. So the view from Chestnut wouldn't be there because this would be part of a development that goes hand in hand with the public market next door.
The alley's still right away, isn't it?
It is right now. The idea is that we'll keep it open for now. There might be a partial closure or some sort of agreement to go over it for loading into the public market area. But it may eventually be closed to vehicular traffic at a certain point to provide access to whatever development happens here. Because this parking lot parcel is proposed to have some sort of a parking structure in combination with any development that occurs to kind of absorb whatever parking is taken away here and then also the anticipated parking needs of that public market.
I have 3 questions. Did I hear right that you intend to replace the brick on the back?
In terms of the patio, the barricade that currently is there, we want to extend it all the way around after the vacant spot that's right next to it. So if you basically divide the building in half of it is just completely empty. It's just kind of, I guess you could call it a distressed partial lot, but all it has is dumpsters in it. So we want to expand that all the way to the width of the building so that it's valuable, usable space, outdoor space, public space. It's not for private use.
Your other question, Steve?
Well, so Jason, you had mentioned what, unsure if they were pursuing historic tax credits or more specifically a SHPO review outside of our umbrella. I'm curious about that also, and that how it interacts with our thoughts if there is a pending SHPO review coming. All right, so my question, I guess, are you pursuing historic tax credits through the state of Wisconsin here, and is there a SHPO review in your future?
We're not pursuing any sort of tax credits. We were originally going to pursue the facade grant. However, my understanding is that there's not going to be enough funding available for this project in the first place, assuming that Dousman and/or another property goes through. We're just not going to be ready for this one in time. So no, we don't.
Steve, your third question?
I think that it's, if we're not going to SHPO, I no longer have a third question. Thank you, Paul.
David, I'm going to kind of play devil's advocate to your concerns on the rear facade and just speculate a little bit that it appears the only change to the rear facade is removal of an exit access door and an ugly exit platform that we can speculate was not there originally, which was on the front facade of the building as well. And they're going to replace that with a window and patch in the brick below the door. So I think that's a definite improvement. Then the change, I guess, architecturally is the removal of, it looks like 4 windows, and they're creating porches for the residential units. Is that, am I reading that accurately?
I think it's just the removal of these windows, correct?
Yeah, just those two, they just turn into sliding doors to give us that outdoor access to tenants, which I'm not an expert on this. I don't know if there's some sort of a fire code where we need to have that, but it'd be very difficult to have residential units without some sort of a access like that.
So the personal opinion I got here is, yes, the rear of the building is visible from Chestnut, but it's pretty far indented compared to the public market next door. I mean, right now, I don't know if the trees are still there, you can barely see the facade from Chestnut. I don't put a lot of credibility into a building being built in the parking lot that will ever cover this up. That's conjecture and speculation, and, you know, we might have moved miles before a building's built in this parking lot. But I guess my opinion on it is still the rear facade of the building, and based on the way we treated rear facades in the past, I don't look at this as being the same visibility as a front face or something that's exposed to the public view.
Something to consider there too, I don't know that you'd actually be in the district to have that public view of the rear. You may have to step outside of the district to get the public view, short of like standing on that property itself. So if you're not in the district and you're looking into the district, that's, you know, something to consider there too.
For the applicant, one of the questions I had is, you mentioned the glass block at the front elevation, and I don't believe it, and Jason, is it really glass block or is it a leaded glass transom window?
Could you go back to that?
What I think I observe is the textured, you know, Chicago-style glass blocks all together, sort of like on the Shower and Schumacher building or other early 20th century types.
So I guess the clarification question for the applicant is, your intention is to maintain this material, or did you say you were going to replace it with new glass block?
Well, just looking at the whole front of this building, it just, to be frank, it looks like a disaster. The left side, those are clearly after not original. The right side doesn't even match anymore. Those are clearly not original. And the middle ones, they look rather distressed. I haven't had them inspected yet, but if we can't keep them, then we'll replace with, you know, some like kind to keep the historical significance. That is our goal.
Yeah, that's a very important statement, I guess, that you just made.
Right.
It'd be the intention of this commission, and I think the historic preservation standards, that transom window is retained. And we've had this discussion up and down Broadway for many years. That those are very specific historical elements in the storefront. So, hearing what you're saying about the condition of it, but if we get into that discussion, we're going to ask for repair as opposed to replace.
Yeah, and that's good to know. I guess my question on that would be, once we get it, at some level, I think we would have to inspect it, right, to see if it's even something that can maintain. I don't know, kind of coming from a place of ignorance on that. But I guess, again, I'm not necessarily looking for approval today on it. I'm looking to see what is the ideal that you look for? Like, what do I need to accomplish and look into here on this? Because there are some significant changes that we're trying to do here. So if you're saying that you want to try to maintain that, then that's what I'm going to try to do. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that would be the direction of this committee. I'm going to go on a limb and speak for everybody and say we'd like to see that transom maintained.
I agree.
Now, I do have a question though. We have had a lot of difficulty finding any historical relevant pictures of this building at all. So I'm kind of flying in the dark a little bit on that. So I've tried looking at the historical website, so I don't know if there's a resource that you guys can recommend for that. It could be helpful to try to maintain that, because I know, like, for example, the other transom windows on there are not original. It'd be nice to know what they did look like, so we can try to get
They
back to
probably
that.
look like the leaded glass that's above the center door.
And if that's the case, then do we, what are the options? Do we, I don't think it's gonna be, I could be wrong here, but to find something that matches that with the same wear and tear, if you will, Or if it's gonna be all new on the sides that kind of looks aged, but then it's gonna look different in the middle, or do we just replace it all?
Well, to address that, sir, what this commission's done is said if it's historic, preserve it. If the historic material is gone, replace with something that fits. And as you observe, the left and the right sides now are dramatically different. My question to you is actually going back to what I said before about your timeline. I think you're hearing a lot of our concerns. Would it work out for your timeline to come back with next month with a request that's got some of the details that we're talking about, such as repair, replace the transom, the glass, the suitability of transmission, and all the little details? Would it be an unfair burden on you to delay this a month?
No, I guess I have two considerations. I guess the one big one is that we're trying to be able to finish at least the front facade before the market opens, and I believe that's next spring. Because the last thing we want to do is have storefront construction going on when you're trying to launch the market right next door. That's a worst case scenario. So no, I anticipated coming back. I just was looking for this kind of a guidance because of the significant changes. So that's no problem at all.
Yeah, it'd be 3 weeks, not 4 weeks, so there's an extra week.
I get some committee clarification. Paul, when you're asking transom questions, are your questions specific to all of the first floor transoms in this photo, or the transom specifically above the center door?
I'm just concerned about the center one. The ones on the left and the right aren't original. So I'm inclined to support the applicant's plan to replace all of that storefront with new.
I'm kind of with you. I just wanted to make sure we were talking about the leaded glass over the center door.
Yep.
As a preferred restoration.
Yeah, I mean, that to me is the important piece, because I think if again, we talked a lot about wagering today. If we're gonna wager, I would wager that piece is probably original to the building.
Yeah, as presented, if you're talking about a paint and finish on windows on the left and right, I'm not overly opposed to that. It's not replacing anything that hasn't been replaced already. Like with the, I see the, to match existing brick and your comments about existing brick pattern, that feels good. I mean, considering a follow-up on the specification data that David's talking about, that I would be perfectly comfortable defaulting to a staff review of later, and restoration of the existing transom in the center over that door, I would make a motion to approve the stuff in front when we close the floor and get there. That's, I think the back is I'd like to talk about a little bit further, but as presented on the front, I mean, this looks like it's everything we want it to be doing, right?
I'm going to make a motion to close the floor so that we can engage in the votes that Stephen just talking about.
Second the motion.
One question.
All in favor?
I,
Any opposed? Okay, the floor is closed.
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve the changes to the front, provided a staff follow-up on the material specifications and visible light transmittance and painted finish with the comment for a restoration effort on the existing transom in the center bay.
Second that.
Any further discussion?
Is that, I'm sorry, just a clarification, is that an assume hold on the rear of the property? Or a separate vote?
So, my discussion point is, I guess I'm still questioning why we're making a differentiation between the front and the rear. What's going to change in a month when the applicant comes back for the rear of the building?
I don't think we've gotten to that point yet. Paul, I would like to proceed with this motion so we can separate things out. Perhaps this committee is going to, or this commission will approve that, but I like the idea of separating out because there are different approaches to the argument.
Okay. Okay, so the motion then is to approve the street facade work. Any other discussion on that?
Then what's, let's say they get the transom glass above that center door checked and they say, oh, it's not salvageable. Can they just go ahead and remove that without checking with the city or coming before our commission again?
Stephen addressed that by mentioning that it's got to get staff approval.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, all in favor? Any opposed? Okay, that motion carries. Do we want to take further action on the remainder of the submission?
Actually, I'd like to hear some more thoughts. I mean, Paul, you're playing the devil's advocate. I'd like to hear some more about this. You said something that I absolutely agree with. If this was on the front, not a chance. The back makes it very different. I agree with that. And I'm trying to remember where we've ever had another situation like this where it was truly the back with a limited street view that had such substantial structural change.
2 blocks to the south of here, I think it was a couple years ago, there was an approval to go over some of the existing brick on a building closer to Shawano Avenue. And I think that was the second story of a masonry building. The brick was failing miserably.
Oh yeah, that was 127 North Broadway.
And so we allowed the applicant to cover up that existing brick because it was failing. I think you could make the argument that that facade was visible from the alley as well.
Can I ask a question about that? I know that on the residential side of things, our interpretation has been street side. Is there examples, I guess, being relatively new to this commission, I don't remember us applying that same logic to a commercial structure. I'm not saying that you haven't in the past or that it's not okay. I just want to make sure that I understand, like Jason, I don't want to call you out on giving us some chapter and verse, but can you reiterate for me that that's pretty represented in the interior standards on a commercial building?
So generally, we look at the additions and alterations as discussed in the Secretary of the Interior Standards. And the underlying rule there is that you want to do stuff that's sympathetic, that can be reversible, and that doesn't have a negative impact on the 7 aspects of integrity. In particular, then the design and the historic materials. But the Secretary of the Interior Standards do make a case for allowing additions, so those are generally steered towards the back or away from public view and attached via like a hyphen or something where there's a clear separation of the old and the new. In this particular case, it's on the back, that's good. It's pretty clear what's going to be new. Is it reversible? It's no less reversible than what we're going to try to reverse on the front of the building by removing those doors. So it's subjective, again, a little squishy.
Let me ask a dumb question. Is the backside of that, if I use the term filler brick, or is it a facing brick? Is that?
I don't think it's the same color, Steve. It's like a cream city color.
I mean, it looks like, right, it looks like it was intended for back of house and filler as opposed to facade. Right?
Hey, Steve, if you could elaborate on the difference between the two, I'm not familiar.
Well, so, typically, when you, be a cost-saving measure in yesteryear masonry construction, you'd use a cheap brick when it's not intended to be exposed as part of the facade, and you'd use an expensive brick when it is. Right, so backs of parapets or party walls or otherwise concealed would be buried with something a little more cost-effective and a little less beautiful and probably a little bit worse tolerances, right? So their sizes were a little varied. They weren't quite as pristine as a facing brick, which is aesthetic quality for a facade.
Okay.
True way of saying it, David, is it was the vinyl siding of old. You got the good masonry and the back got whatever they had left over.
Right, the cuts. Yeah.
You are not gonna live that one down. Well, but that actually is a very apt description, okay.
So, and I'm not sure that in the policing of the Secretary of the Standards, we can differentiate the difference. In my mind, a filler brick's kind of crap, and you sort of like, whatever, it's filler brick, right? But I'm not sure that I can just employ that bias. And that's why I'm trying to feel Jason out for a bit more of a ruling on the good book, as it were.
But the differentiation between the two types of brick does go to what we've used before, the term, the architect's original vision. And the front of that building has got a very different brick presentation than the backside. That front side is very visually appealing. I'm looking at the backside now of Google Earth. That is a very bland brick. So vinyl brick, Paul. You know, and so to me that suggests the architect's original vision was this is the unobserved backside, and more than likely during original construction there was a similar type building adjoining to the back. So you're definitely pushing me toward agreeing that this is an insignificant impact.
Suits me. What about the connection of the structure of the decks? Right? That's, have you guys gotten near something similar in this sort of setting? That's really what I'm looking for. I don't know what this 127 Broadway, no?
I don't know.
The decks aren't original, they're new materials, so there's no precedent for us to really say yea or nay to that. And,
Yeah, you gotta attach it somehow.
no, it's kind of means and methods, really.
Okay.
I mean, we wouldn't allow them on the front facade, we know that.
Well, I know, and that's, David's statement's not lost on me, that,
I guess the way I look at it, Steve, is that it's a modern material. How they connect it to the existing building is really an engineering question, and you know, you and I both know there's probably right and wrong ways to do that, but we're not really, it's not the purview of this committee. If they were putting a sign on a historic facade, we would talk to the applicants about how they're anchoring that sign in the historic masonry and making sure that they're not creating more damage to that historic brick or stone masonry. But in this instance, you know, what we're on the verge of doing is saying that these are non-historic materials that we're going to allow because it's on the rear facade of a building, not the historically significant portion of the building, and so at that point, I kind of look at it as not a problem.
sure, right, you
If
let me
I was to say that those porches, there's nothing that looks historic about them, well, I think that's the point. We don't want to try and replicate history. You know, we're not going to start building wooden shaker porches with newel posts and wood railings.
No, that's fair. I mean, I get it, I just, if you let them cut a bigger hole in the brick, you certainly could let them bolt on a deck. That's reasonable, fair enough, fair enough. Yeah.
So where are we at with this rear facade? Do we have anybody that's interested in making a motion? Are we approved the front facade with stipulations that they have to return to staff with specifications, and I guess,
Yeah.
what are we gonna do about the rear?
And what was staff's recommendation on the rear specifically, or was it not?
Staff kind of lost track, sorry. I guess if you're putting me on the spot, I don't know that I wrote it out here. I want you guys to talk about it. Personally, I think it's okay. You know, it's rear elevation. I don't think you're in the district when you observe the rear elevation, so you're not really looking to feel, not looking for that feeling and design because you're already outside of the district looking in. When you're in the district and surrounded by it, you expect to have that feeling. That's one of the 7 aspects of integrity, but you know, we're fairly permissive, I think, when it comes to rear changes like that.
So, I mean, seeing that, I would make a motion to approve the rear pending that the details, the final details are approved by the staff. As far as like the materials and everything that we just talked about, the final details, when they have it done, come back to staff and say, here's what we think. And then if we need to have another meeting, we put it on the agenda for another meeting.
Was that a motion, Ron?
Yes, that's a motion.
I go ahead and second that. Is there any other discussion regarding that motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, that's it for certificates for tonight. Informational, item F, staff level COAs.
We had one. It was for a fence here that was on the side and rear yard. So, very appropriate fence for the area. That's it.
Staff update?
I'm going to lob this over to Jason. At the last meeting, which I was not able to attend, there was a discussion about non-contributing structures, non-contributing homes, and additions within our district. So Jason has some information for you guys on that.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be as helpful as you're hoping. So I did some looking in specifically to see what sort of guidance there was on design review for non-contributing buildings in a district. And lo and behold, I didn't really find anything. So I wanted to remind you just of a couple things real quick. There are 7 aspects of integrity. These are usually talked about with regard to a particular discrete property, but you could also think of it as for a district or collection of properties. I focus in on setting and feeling there, that you know, a historic district, it has a certain setting. That setting does not include a brand new house that is totally out of character for that district. And the feeling that you have when walking through a historic district should be of a historic district, not of a loose collection of old things with a whole bunch of new stuff on the in-between. From there, I guess I can refer you to our local ordinance. Our local ordinance does define what a contributing building is. It means something of historic, cultural, archaeological, or architectural significance to the district. From that, I would infer that non-contributing is something else. I think we would all agree to that. So Looking further at the ordinance, I look for any instances that speak specific to non-contributing buildings or structures. I note that we're required to come up with a historic district preservation plan, which council has been so kind as to point out we have not yet done. That plan includes an inventory of all the buildings that are contributing and non-contributing. Good to know, we have that. Non-contributing buildings are mentioned again when we talk about guidelines for new structures and additions. New structures and additions should be visually compatible with the contributing buildings. That doesn't speak specifically to non-contributing. Moving on, last bullet here, when we talk about demolitions, we question whether or not the thing to be demolished contributes to the character of the historic district. So, next slide, I think this is the last bit I have on this. It's National Park Service definition of what is contributing and non-contributing. Non-contributing ultimately is something that wasn't present during the period of significance, or it's been messed up to the point, and I say messed up with all the personal judgment that shouldn't be in that, something that's been altered to an extent that it no longer maintains the contributingness for which it was once contributing. So, just stepping back to reflect for a moment, I think the Landmarks Commission was discussing changes to a ranch-style house that was non-contributing. And perhaps I hear secondhand or thirdhand that there was some concern that the changes proposed would make it a building that's non-contributing even more non-contributing. That's maybe not the right perspective to approach it. I think the way to approach that is to say there are non-contributing buildings in a district. Those buildings are never going to be contributing unless they became non-contributing through changes and then somebody's like undoing the changes through some intensive stuff. But the ranch house was not built in the period of significance, and it will never have been built in the period of significance. So when looking at changes to that sort of a non-contributing resource, the goal is to minimize any negative impacts to the 7 aspects of integrity for the contributing buildings around it. And again, there we're talking about feeling and setting. So if the changes proposed were to change that ranch style into a 3-story glass palace, that would definitely have a negative impact to the historic integrity of feeling and setting. If we're looking at cosmetic changes to a non-contributing building, then my feeling there is you just kind of ought to let it go. Is it going to make that particular house less contributing or more non-contributing than it ever was? Well, the thing to remember there is that the historic character of that house in the district has never been investigated. Nobody's ever defined it. It's kind of fallen into a black hole of it's non-contributing, and the story ends there. So when the city of Green Bay recently had a new inventory and citywide survey done, that citywide survey never even looked at these non-contributing properties. Is it possible that that ranch house was eligible for National Register listing as an individual property because of its ranchy integrity? That's maybe possible, but the question's never been asked, it's never been investigated.
Yes, if I could just jump in, I'm so sorry to interrupt, but
No, please.
we don't have enough fun on this committee, and I would like to say that Paul Marcy has ranchy integrity. Sorry, carry on.
Yeah, ranchy integrity. So hey, the bar is pretty high for ranchy integrity. I don't know if anybody's really got it. You gotta have the original doors, that includes your garage door, the original windows, and all the original siding. Even if that's like aluminum, or maybe, dare I say, like the first iteration of vinyl siding. So it's a high bar. Again, my best advice, well, I can say that ultimately it's up to the Landmarks Commission how you want to treat non-contributing properties. That's what the nation does, is when a local municipality decides to write design guidelines for a district, you can discuss it in there. We don't have that yet, or we're just not there yet. From a holistic perspective, whatever changes somebody proposes to make to a non-contributing building, I wouldn't even look at that building, I just look at the buildings around it. I'd say, hey, is this worse now for the surroundings than what's currently there? Or is it really a no change? I mean,
Well, the good news, Jason, is I think with your explanation, we got it right last time. That, no, I don't think it impacted the big picture. It impacted a non-contributing building, but not significantly, like you said, a 3-story. So I think we got it right. It was a unique situation, generally unprecedented, and fortunately, I think we did get it right.
I think you did too. If you need me to say it, then I think you've all done an excellent job.
I don't think I need to hear it, but I think Paul needs to hear it because he's taken a bit of a beating tonight.
Just wish Ron would have been here so we could have gotten done with this meeting in 12 minutes.
Hey, speaking of which, as long as we're on the record, I want to thank Paul for cutting in and taking over tonight because my Zoom decided to update, and that's what happened. I couldn't get into the darn meeting and all this kind of stuff, and now it's a mess. So, but thank you, Paul, for stepping in and taking over tonight. You did a great
No
job.
problem.
Thank you.
An apology and a question. I'm sorry because I think I was late as well. Was this meeting really intended to start at 4 p.m.?
Nope, 4:30.
30.
She sent the Zoom meeting a half hour early. I think just because we reserved the room a half hour early, but it was a 4:30 start still.
Okay, well, the meeting invites, that's going to be confusing. A couple of us assumed it was 4:30 at our standard time, but the invite actually did say 4.
Okay, I think that should just be for this one because it was a special meeting. But we'll make sure that there are 4:30 going forward.
Any other items from staff?
I'm not sure if there was an introduction done at the last meeting of our new member, Alder Hutchison. Did that
I
happen?
wasn't there.
Oh,
No.
okay. This is Jim's first meeting, so everybody welcome Jim. He is the alder for the 1st District in the city of Green Bay. He is our
Second.
new, really?
District
Oh,
two.
yeah, Grant's number 1, sorry. I'm really tired, I'm not usually here
That's
till 6
okay.
o'clock. He sits on our plan commission currently, so it's a really good overlap because there's a lot of stuff that happens between historic buildings and the planning process. And I believe you're a retired engineer, is that correct?
Civil engineer, yeah,
Yes.
geotech.
Yep, so, in briefing him on how Landmarks works and what we do, there was some conversations about trying to create either quarterly, biannually, some sort of report to council, so that way they're seeing more information from us versus just when we have appeals going to them. So I'm gonna be working with him on that process to try to make sure that we're getting that positive, hey, we approve most of our COAs in front of them more regularly. So we'll be working on that together.
Well, thank you for that. Welcome, Jim. Our average meeting time is usually 15 minutes. So.
Oh,
That's true. That's true.
well, that'd be a switch.
Yeah.
All right, if there's no further business, I make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any
And thanks
opposed?
again, Paul.
Thank you, everybody. See you next month.
Recording stopped.
Learning a lot.